jungle main, Hecarim jungle one trick, whose GM has been challenger, finished his ADC climb from Iron, I think. And then he has a video recording his thoughts. So we're here to react to see what he says.
If you've never played ADC before, then by the end of this video, you'll feel like you have. For the last 3 weeks, I've been playing on a fresh account where I've gone through all the elos from Iron all the way up until Diamond, playing only ADC. Throughout that time,
I've
never duoed a single time, I've never played with any other player, and I have only locked in stereotypical bot lane picks. Apart from
no mages.
The games I played Dr. Mundo, of course. And yes, after having a day that felt like a fever dream and inting almost every single game, I did end up getting rank restricted as well. So, what I'm going to do today for you guys is I'm going to give you guys my unfiltered experience as an ADC player and really let you guys know what playing the role is actually like. To start things off, I haven't played lane in years. The last time I was a laner was back in Season 10 when I was a lane Hecarim one trick and I used to play Hecarim mid and top.
Lane Hecarim? Oh yeah.
To hit a peak of Grandmaster 300 LP, but every champion I played besides Hecarim had a legitimate 30% win rate. And that's just for laning.
My
when
ears,
it comes
bro.
to playing ADC,
the
last time I consistently played ADC was back in Season 5 when I used to be a Nard top and a Jinx bot 2 trick. So, as you can tell, going into this challenge, I didn't really know what to expect. My thoughts were that ADC was an easy role, piloted by crybabies that would just get mad when their support left the lane. And as a result, I thought that if I just played a bunch of games, played mechanically well, which I knew I was able to do on Hecarim, and then also built items that increase survivability, I thought I'd be good. My approach to playing ADC was that of a bruiser player's mindset.
This guy built tank items, yeah?
What I don't want to see when I see an ADC on the enemy team. If I see somebody building Berserker's Greaves and a bunch of crit items, I'm happy. Why? Because they're easy to kill.
True.
But then when they build things like steel caps or bruiser items, they become infinitely harder to kill.
True.
And they make my job way harder as a bruiser.
So we'll agree.
Into this challenge that if I played ADCs like bruisers and I just built them kind of tanky,
this is
then
a good
I'd
trade
be able to
with
breeze
Soraka.
through every elo and 1v9 every game. Let's just say
1v9 every game.
A bit of a reality check.
Oh,
elos,
reality check.
Even though I did lose a lot of games initially, the games did feel kind of easy. I would have way more deaths than anybody would ever think is acceptable for ADC players, but I was still able to maintain high-ish win rates of about 60% because my mechanics in teamfighting were just really good. Yes, sometimes I would go in too early and end. Yes, a lot of the times I would get caught out on side lane. But in the games where I would actually play the team fights properly, my spacing was good enough that I was able to solo carry quite a few games.
Oh, this is a great trade.
Second mid game started approaching.
What rank is this? Oh, he took a tower shot.
We'll talk about rule 1 of being an ADC.
Rule 1.
Comebacks are possible.
True.
The biggest thing that I learned about being an ADC player for a little while is that if your laning phase goes badly, it does not mean the game is over. Since
unless you feed the jungle.
Carries are typically expected to position well and play off their teammates engage and play off other people going in, it makes it so that you'll have quite a few opportunities within a game where if you can just bide your time, you can find a random triple kill, get enough gold through shutdowns to get more gold than the enemy AD carry, and then from that point on just take over the entire game. The amount of games where I was literally going 0-8, 0-9, but I would be able to find that one team fight that just gave me shutdowns that put me ahead of the enemy ADC would probably account for about 40 to 50% of my wins. And this builds into point
the heck? So many wins.
Mental is the most important thing. I'm going to stand up for this because I really need to go in depth on what I'm about to say. But if you actually listen to what I'm going to say, you'll probably agree. When you're playing ADC, one of the issues is that you're not going to have a lot of control over the early stages of the game.
True.
And this is one of the big points about being an ADC player. Point 2. Your early game impact is only limited to your lane. You cannot roam in the same way that support can. You cannot shove and roam in the same way that a mid laner can. You cannot make TP plays in the same way that top laner can. And you also cannot gank the same way a jungler can. As a result, the early stages of your game are going to be very limited in terms of what options you really have. Because the only thing you can actually do is walk to lane. And this is going to make it very frustrating when the enemy jungler is going to pat top or your support is going to roam and the enemy support doesn't, because what's going to end up happening is you're going to feel like there's nothing you can do.
True.
But the truth is that every role is like that. Yes, even though junglers and mid laners can get roams and do crazy shit in games that allow them to get leads, the amount that you actually gain from that isn't a game-winning margin that's going to break or make different roles. The number one characteristic...
you know, if your support roams top and they lose 3v4, the game feels like it's over, right? I will say that we have all been there. Like, it's the same as, like, jungle ganking top and he feeds enemy top laner a double kill. You know, that's like the same vibe. There's nothing you can do. But that, I guess you can say that every role, that can happen in every role.
That every single ADC has to possess if they actually want to win games is mental fortitude. And that's, believe it or not, the reason why I've been losing a lot of games from the time I've been Diamond. When you see your support roaming, you are not allowed hitting the wave. When you see your jungler pathing top, you do not want to engage the enemy.
True.
But my issue is that I always want to fight. I want to fight, I
Same.
want to outplay, I want to outtrade.
Same.
And anytime I see things on my screen, I just want to kill them.
Same.
If you're the same as me in that regard, then I am telling you, ADC is not really for you.
Shit.
You need to actually choose your fights properly.
Shit.
And most of the time, farming consistently is the best way to win in the mid game. But the problem is that that's also a very boring approach to League of Legends.
Can't fucking
Sitting
play.
bot lane farming and trying not to die isn't really the exciting league experience that most players would hope for. And as someone who's been a jungle main for years and always loved the idea of going for ganks, going for 2v2, 3v3 plays and all this stuff, it's one of the things that I've been struggling very hard to adapt to. Instead of being a playmaker, you have to be reactionary in the majority of cases. And if you're not, the higher you climb, the worse it's gonna get. My playstyle of just side laning, all-inning, and perma-fighting worked for me until I got to Diamond. And then once I got to Diamond, I would actually be able to solo lose games for my teams in the games where I dropped 5, 6, 7 deaths by 15 minutes. That's when things start to go really badly. But this doesn't necessarily mean that ADC is a weak role. It just means that there are different power dynamics for different roles. A jungler can make plays early game that gets his team a winning lead, but if in the mid game the jungler's team refuses to collapse on objectives or they don't clear out waves fast enough to enable him, then the jungler's game will be unplayable at a certain point as well. So the trade-off of ADC is that even though early game you're weak and you're susceptible to having a bunch of things happen that are going to make your game feel hard to play, once you approach to the mid game and the laning phase actually ends, everyone's existence revolves around you, which means that the cards are in your hand. Your team will want to peel you, the enemy team will want to focus you, and the entire game will revolve around which team's ADC is going to die first. So it isn't necessarily that ADC is a weaker role than jungle, for example, is. It's just that ADC players have to be a lot more patient than junglers do in the early stages of the game. So
counterpoint, I think it is weaker if you can't even get to those spikes where you get the carry, right? If, let's say, the game average time is like decided by like 15 minutes. I do think ADC is a weaker role. Let's say the average game time is 50 minutes. ADC is fucking OP, right? And I think the general game time of today's average league game is usually decided within like 15, 20 minutes. That's why it feels weak, so to speak, right?
So that they can actually get to the point where their mid to late game matters. But listen, as a jungle...
Yeah, you have to get to that point where the mid late game matters.
Talking to all the ADCs out there, yes, if your jungler paths top, he is fucking trolling. Junglers should path bot every single game, and if they don't, you have my permission to flame them for not doing it. Before we get into the itemization, which is going to be the biggest topic of this video by far, I do want to expand a little bit on the jungle problem. So once again, before starting the ADC challenge, I would always talk about how ADCs were whiny crybabies, but the truth is that the way that they whine and they cry when it comes to how the game is played is oftentimes correct.
Yes, it is.
Games are going to come down to
whichever
team gets soul wins the game. So when the enemy jungler is pathing bot and getting their bot lane ahead, and they have 2 dragons by 20 minutes, and your top laner just got your Malphite top 1 kill,
yeah,
that guy is
it's fucking doomed.
the game for your entire team.
fucking Doom.
The real reason
Yes.
why bot lane
Yes.
is the most impactful
Yes.
role has to do with dragons.
Yes.
Once
Yes.
you approach the mid game, then it makes it so that you need to play for win conditions if you actually want to end the game.
Yes.
Because just walking mid and hitting the wave isn't good enough with the amount of wave clear in the game. As a result, dragons are the one
Yes,
insurance
so
policy
stacking.
that can win you every single game.
Yes,
because
exactly.
when you have 2 to 3, playing for soul is good enough that it can legitimately win you the game. So
Yes.
when your jungler
All true.
pats top and the enemy jungler pats bot, the real issue isn't the fact that your bot lane is gonna die. It's the fact that the enemy jungler is gonna prio dragons and your team isn't. Yes, bot lane does account for
This can work if your team does not prioritize the dragon. It can work. Your top side just got to snowball, right? Your top side just got to get strong and snowball. But that's like, good luck if they throw their lead, which they will do. Then enemy team just has 2 dragons. And you're just like, oh, fuck.
40% of the team since there are 2 players in it, but the real strength of it is just how close they are to the drags. Getting a good gank bot off and then afterwards transitioning that into a dragon play is legitimately a strategy that any novice level jungler could employ and easily get them to diamond. So do I think that junglers should be skipping their entire camp to randomly dive the enemy bot lane? No. But not pathing bot is an extremely bad habit that every jungler needs to get out of their mind because dragons are broken and you need to play for them. So now it's going to be
Dragon's
time
OP.
for the main part of the video that you guys are all waiting for. Itemization. One of
I was
the
waiting for
biggest
this?
claims that I made when I first started this challenge
Yeah,
was
tank
that
items.
ADCs itemized like garbage. They would build full crit, they would build Berserker's Greaves, and then they would wonder why the enemy assassin one-shots them. Well, after playing this
True.
role for 400 games, I can confidently say
What is he going to say? Yo, what is this, bro?
that although I was right about certain things, I was also wrong about others. Let me explain. When it comes to ADCs building Berserker's Greaves, I think this is the worst thing you could ever do on any ADC, and the reason why is simple. A lot of the time,
Berserker
as
sucks.
an ADC, you're going to want to farm waves. You're either going to want to be bot lane so that you can catch the wave before crashing into turret, you're going to want to be mid lane so you can shove out the wave before an objective, or you're going to be rotating to different lanes after winning your own. What this means is that a lot of the time, there are going to be situations where you are unprotected. If your support is roaming, if your jungler's on the other side of the map, if you don't know where the enemy team is, a lot is left up to chance. But in the same grain of thought, you're also going to have a lot of situations where you and the enemy ADC are in this 1v1 scenario. If both supports roam and both ADCs are left ball lane, then you're 1v1 versus the enemy ADC. If the jungler decides to try and kill you while his barn's on reset, then you're 1v1 against the enemy jungler. And this scenario, more often than not, is going to happen in your games. And the issue with Berserker's Greaves is that Greaves don't actually give you any survivability whatsoever. Berserker's Greaves are going to increase your damage output slightly with the attack speed, and it's going to
Attack speed
feel
fake, though.
really good to have. But the truth is that if you have a Jinx that has Yuntal versus Steel Caps, or Jinx that has Yuntal versus Greaves, then she will always be able to win the side lane, or the 1v1, versus a non-overfed jungler, or an enemy ADC that itemized Greaves, more often than not.
Agreed.
Especially since most ADCs don't build any armor pen until their 3rd or even 4th item, getting Tabby will be enough oftentimes to give you the deciding amount of tankiness that is going to solo win you fights in 1v1 or even 2v2 settings.
I agree with
now,
this.
obviously there are exceptions if the enemy goes double mage bot, which is broken as fuck, by the way.
Agreed!
Or if you're in this 1v3
Fucking
scenario,
mage
but
bot,
I'm
bro.
telling you that itemizing defensive boots the majority of the time is going to increase your win rate.
The
Because
thing is, it's not defensive. It's specifically fucking ninja tabbies. Merc treads, dog. Okay, you pretty much can never build that. So even like I've built merc treads against 5 AP. It feels fucking bad. Okay, but ninja tabbies, broken.
you'll make it so that you won't get one shot by the people trying to dive you, and you're also going to have a defensive edge when you and the enemies are all in each other. So for defensive boots for ADC, I think I was right. But now,
I agree.
what about itemization? Part of the problem with being an ADC is that the majority of the time, if you only build one crit item, it's not enough for you to actually do damage.
You can't do anything.
You need two. Something that I've learned over the course of my time
Yantao
as an
IE.
ADC player is that when it comes to crit items, there are only 3 good items. You have Infinity Edge,
IE LDR.
Bombs Regards, and Yantao.
Yeah,
Every
Yantao.
seal item is trash. I'll
True.
talk a little bit more about that later. And items like, let's say, Collector get outvalued by LDR, so they're not even worth building. Part of the issue
I
with
agree.
playing ADC is
That item
that
sucks.
you are always going to be hitting what you are in range of hitting, which is the enemy front line. If
Yup.
you do not have any armor pen built by your third item, then you are going to be legitimately worthless because you won't be able to damage any tank or bruiser that has steel caps or Randuins.
True.
But in the same grain of thought process as well, part of the issue too is that once you're at 3 items, so is the enemy team. And if they have a Nocturne that's going to ult on you, or a LeBron that's going to try assassinating you, then you will not even be able to get an auto attack off before dying. So
True.
that's the reason why on champions like Saber, for example, I go Yantao into Infinity Edge, and then afterwards I get Cleaver, because it gives me the resistances that I need, so that even if I get dove by the enemy, I'm still able to survive.
Cleaver
And
only
while
gives health.
People might talk a lot about positioning this, positioning that. The truth is that you cannot position against a cannon's flash ult. You cannot position against a Nocturne ulting on top of you, or a
You can. You do. You can, but you need something specific to outplay, like Flash or Spell Shield or Hourglass if you're playing Kai'Sa. But you normally you can't, right? That's what he's saying.
flashing from Fog of War and ulting on you. So the kind of TLDR that I found on playing ADC has been itemize 2 to maybe even 3 offensive items if you can afford to when the enemy team doesn't have dive. Like, for example, Infinity Edge, Yantao, and then LDR. And then once you get those items, itemize defensively. You will not drastically alter your damage output if you go something like, for example, Navori versus if
I don't agree with this. You will, in fact, drastically change your damage output if you build a damage item fourth. For example, he just said Navori. If you're playing Tristana, you have IE, LDR, and Yantao. A Navori is going to be like so much better for doing damage and getting your bomb combo off, and having your Q and lethal tempo uptime is going to be way better than like going like a BT. Like there are some games where you're going to need to like be defensive fourth item, but if you don't have to, you shouldn't, right? If we use a famous example, with Caitlyn, if you build defensive on that champion, you're fucking trolling usually. You need to be able to one-shot their carries with that champion, so you definitely can't build defensive after 3 offensive items.
if you build something like Hexplate. But what you will be doing is you're making it so that the enemy team's job of one-shotting you becomes infinitely harder. And now
true.
we'll talk a little bit about Zeal items, the worst class of items in the entire game. If
Agreed.
There's one thing that I want
Fucking
you to
terrible.
know before playing ADC, or I want you to know if you do play ADC, it's that you should never, ever, ever build any of these items. Exceptions might be that if you want to get a late game item as Runans as your literal 6th item, or if you want to itemize Runans because you're itemizing Cleaver and you want to benefit from armor pen on a bunch of people, then go for it. But if you're going items like Navori, if you're going items like Phantom Dancer or Rapid Fire Cannon, you are trolling.
Nah, sometimes you need to, guys. The Zeal items exist to kite and weave in auto attacks between abilities better. It's just that it's a one-shot meta, so they feel terrible, right? But you definitely need Zeal item to maximize damage output on certain champions. You definitely need a Zeal item to activate, the RFC range for certain plays like Jhin 4-shot or Caitlyn headshot. Definitely, it's definitely not a never buy Zeal items, but Zeal items are no longer core items, so to speak. They're like, you get them like late into the game, like 4th item probably, or 5th or 6th or whatever, so yeah.
When you build an item that gives you AD, like Experimental Hexplate, for example, which gives you 40. What ends up happening is that if you have 3 crit items and then you build Experimental Hexplate, you're getting 40 AD. Your 200% crit ends up bringing this to an extra 80 damage per auto, and the Infinity Edge amplification is going to turn this from 80 into about 100 to 110 bonus damage per auto.
Okay, wait, we're talking about Hexplate's offensive stats, but bro, BT is like 80 AD, no?
Itemizing items like Navori or Phantom Dancer feel awful because the problem is that you lose damage when you build them. And don't even get me started on
Actually kind of true.
them before a third item. Because
Building Zeal item, so what he's saying is you're losing damage when you build a Zeal item because it doesn't give you the stats you need to one-shot. This is true, right? Because if you build a Zeal item, you're putting your money into attack speed, which fucking sucks low-key in today's League of Legends. Like, how do you make a play in the at 15 minutes and beyond? You one-shot them, right? So you need to build like AD, you need to build like lethality or whatever. So that's why he's saying like Hex played over. That's why he's saying like you lose damage when you build a Zeal item.
Because bruisers and tanks will require you to get an LDR. So if you're going Yuntown to Infinity Edge, and then you decide to get Runans on Twitch or Zeri, you will do 0 damage to their tanks.
This is true, but the point of buying Runons on Twitch or Zeri third isn't to do damage to the tanks. It's to enable a Runon's play on the entire team, like the backline. We're gonna play Twitch. No universe, you are going to be hitting their front line. You're not playing front to back. You are going invisible in the middle of a fight, run up to the back lane, press R, and try and AoE and kill them, right? That's the whole point of Runon's third on Twitch. It's actually the same thing on Zeri. You are not trying to front to back when you go Yentao IE Runons. You're trying to wait until you find an EWR one-shot combo onto their backline, right? So I think with these specific examples, Zeal item does make a lot of sense.
You will do 0 damage to the front line, and you're just going to be tickling them and praying that your team does something. So an item like, let's say, Runans can sometimes be good on some champions as a last item, but Phantom Dancer, Rapid Fire, and even Navori should never be itemized, because you just lose way too much damage when you do. And I know some people are going to say, well, you're going to attack a bit faster. It doesn't even matter. The difference between 1.2 and 1.5 attack speed over an 8-second long fight is going to be maybe 1 or 2 autos. But imagine
Wait, what? That doesn't sound right.
Autos where
that
you're
doesn't
getting
sound
that
right.
bonus 100 to 150 damage. The DPS difference is way more. And for anyone that wants to push this Navori, Ultrasun, or Saber propaganda, just stop. ADC fights are not going to be lasting 8 seconds anyways. By the time your Q or your W run out, the fight is already over. So playing to have permanent uptime is a fake thing that doesn't even exist. But wait! Before you click off, there's one last thing I need to say. My account wasn't permanently banned. It was only rank restricted, and in order to unlock the account from being rank restricted, I need to play 3 normal games. So what I'm going to be doing is on Monday, I'm going to be calling in the help of a friend, Kadeem, and with his challenger normal level of skill, he's going to help me unlock the account from being rank restricted. So the ADC arc will not end here. I will still continue to play it. I will be interspersing jungle here and there as well though, because I did find this new insanely broken hacker mode this weekend that I'm going to be making a video soon about. But now that I managed to have a little bit of a mental reset from ADC, I feel like I'm actually
Mental reset from ADC.
serious again and fall back in line of what my true intention was with the
You guys think he's going to hit Masters?
So, crazy league content coming up with a little bit of variety too, so stay tuned for that. But thank you guys all for watching the video. I might make a part 2 in the future if I do end up hitting Masters, so stay tuned for all that as well. Anyways, thank you guys for tuning in. Like the video if you haven't, sub if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys all for the next one. Peace.
That was a fun video to watch. I agree with a lot of things Dante says. I think he knows the ADC perspective now. He knows how ADC mains feel because he's literally played. I mean, respect to him. He played like, I don't even know, like 600 games or something, or 300 games. I don't even know how many games he played, but he played a lot of games. So respect to him. But yeah, I resonated with a lot of things he said. Guys, they're starting to understand us. They're starting to understand us.